I think horror films are a great way to kind of almost prepare yourself for things like death and grief and trauma and things that we don't like to talk about. Well, I'm Christopher Wesley Moore. I'm a writer, actor, director, producer, do a little bit of everything, I guess. From Jackson, Mississippi, born and raised. And yeah, mainly a filmmaker, mostly, but I do some theater work too. I was 4 years old. It was 1993, and there was the last theatrical re-release of Disney's Snow White. My aunt took me to go see it, and the minute the movie started, I was in like another world. It was the most beautiful experience I'd ever had in my life. I remember feeling every possible human emotion. I was terrified. I was intrigued. I felt the romance. I felt the comedy and the drama. And once that was done, I remember walking out of the darkened theater into like the bright August, humid, sticky southern, summer, and just thinking like I'm not the same person that I was when I first walked in there. This feeling like this movie just changed me on this molecular level, and I'd like to do that. Over the next year, I discovered I couldn't really draw, so that was kind of a problem if you're going to be an animator. And so I was like, oh man, what am I going to do? So my family and I took a vacation to Orlando, and we went to Universal Studios. And at the time, they had a Alfred Hitchcock scenes from his most famous films, and they would recreate them. And they recreated the scene from Psycho, the shower scene, and it showed exactly how they shot it and how they cut it together. And I realized it's a magic trick, with the way you frame things, the way you cut it together with the music and everything. It creates this illusion. And that's when I was like, okay, I don't need to be a Disney animator. I just need to be a filmmaker of some sort. If I was on a football team and I broke my thumb, so I couldn't really play. I've got all this free time now, and I guess my parents just wanted me to have some extra curricular activities. And there was this play. It was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. It's a musical, and I auditioned for it and played Schroeder. Had to fake play a piano. It was great. It's wonderful. I never got like that feeling when I was on stage then of like this is what I want to do with my life. It was just like I hope I hit my marks and know my lines, and just I was just trying to survive. Um, but then once I got into theater later on, it became just a big love. I started to discover it when I was a kid, and I'd go to the video store back in the day, and you would see a film that had a great cover. So you would know it wasn't like a normal mainstream Hollywood film right out of the gate. But inevitably, the ones that were good would pull you in through story or performance or some inventive camera work. And I noticed pretty soon you kind of forgot that it was low budget because it just told a good story. Those really special ones, they just stick with you. It's a lot like people that don't want to watch movies that are black and white or are foreign films where you have to read subtitles. It seems like it's extra work for them to do it when you're gonna miss a lot of great stuff. There's a lot of great movies out there that don't look like the normal mainstream Netflix film that just came out. You gotta just try some stuff. And I think maybe I don't know how it is with the newer generations. I mean, maybe they're using stuff like Tubi the way that maybe kids from the 90s or the 80s used like cable TV, where you just be scrolling on a Saturday night and be like, what is this movie? This looks weird. And you just sit down and you watch it. And you would discover a film that became one of your favorites of all time. I love Tubi. I think that what they've done for indie film is just such a godsend. I mean, there's so many films out there that are finally able to get to a wide audience because of them. And so what they've done has just been wonderful. I'm just so thrilled that these films can have a life. And it's like you look at them, and it's not only a great selection of like very low budget indie stuff, they've got the best selection of horror in general. I met a lot of really great people there, a lot of really phenomenal folks that I still consider to be great friends to this day. My first year wasn't great. I was kind of just it was a little bit of shell shock, and I kind of tried to be uh I think I thought I was going to go off to college and sort of create this new persona, which was really weird. I don't know why I decided to do that. So I became like the weird guy who would wear sunglasses all the time, even at night, inside. And I didn't make a lot of friends because they were like, "Who's this weirdo?" You know. And so I look back on that. I'm like, that was my fault. That was me being stupid. Like, what was I thinking? Well, I mean, you got to do Trilogy of Terror because it just shows so much range. I think that movie was a lot of people's kind of gateway into horror because it's, it's not very gory. It's semi-appropriate for children, sort of. I don't know. I mean, not really. It's terrifying, but it's not violent. Day of the Locust. It's not really horror, but her performance is phenomenal. It's so good. She's this sort of um this Hollywood extra, this professional extra who's trying to make it in the movies, and you just know it's never going to happen for her. But she doesn't seem to know that yet, and it's just so depressing to watch her struggle and pretend like it's going to happen. Come back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, where she shares the screen with people like Cher and Kathy Bates, Sandy Dennis. I mean, it's just this phenomenal cast, and yet I think she kind of walks away with the movie in every way, in every conceivable way. I mean, like I said, I was born and raised here, so the kinds of people that I know are just Southern through and through. The people you encounter, the beliefs that they have, the kinds of rules that they like to follow, and if you don't follow them, all of a sudden you're kind of shunned. It's almost like a little cult of its own, where there's all this stuff that it seems like we never really get over it. It just keeps coming back. Like we never seem to learn anything in the South. It just and there's all these traditions that you don't understand, and if you ask about them, all of a sudden like you're labeled as like difficult or strange because you want to know why this thing has been done this way for you know hundreds of years, and when it doesn't really make sense. There's just a lot of stuff like that. It's an interesting place, architecturally, visually, um, climate wise. Certainly there's nowhere like the South. I think that's why we're all so crazy, is because we're always hot. And of course, like the whole gay stuff, like it's not cool to be gay here. It's not cool. People don't like it. They're like, what are you doing, you heathen? And that's not fun. It's not fun to go around knowing that a lot of the population, if they know something about you, they're gonna use it against you or think of you as less than or something. It's just not a fun way to go through life. So I think I tackle those kinds of anxieties and fears and stuff as well. A lot of stuff about religion, I think, finds its way into my work. People using it for sort of nefarious reasons. Um, and because, I mean, I guess with Blessed Are the Children, that was my first real kind of movie. And that was about religious extremism. There was some of it tackled and triggered a little bit in Stranger, and certainly in Children of Sin. That's the most overt one, I think. Um, and then even a bit in Trash Man. Caroline's mom is always kind of saying like, "Hey, just pray it away. It'll be fine. You'll be able to get outside if you just pray." Which doesn't work. She just keeps getting worse. So there is kind of that idea of people in the South using religion as kind of this fix-all thing, to where they don't have to think it through. They just say, "Give it to God, and everything will be fine." And I think it's a way for people to kind of sometimes get stuck and just kind of not take responsibility for their actions. And I find especially Southern women to be very interesting. I don't know what it is, but I was raised around all of them. Um, and it just, they have a certain cadence and this sort of strength that I really respond to. I was just I was raised around so many interesting, dynamic Southern women, and I love to see them overcome things and break the cycles of abuse or religious trauma. Or it's exciting for me to watch and to write. And So I put out a casting call for that role, and Joanne responded, and she sent in an audition. And the eerie part is that her audition is almost like beat for beat of what she did in that particular scene in the finished film. I mean, it was all there immediately, and we were on the same page. She found the humor in the film, which I was grateful for, because I think a lot of people wouldn't have tapped into that. And so I was really glad that she understood, like, yeah, it can be a little funny at times. Because, like, the line about the sin stick, I mean, that's just funny. It's just funny. There's no getting around it. It's hysterically funny. And we were laughing the whole time that we shot that scene because it's ridiculous. And so she got that. She got that immediately. And I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be so much fun. And sure enough, that shoot was one of the most delightful times of my life. I tend to normally leave actors alone to find their characters unless they have a problem and they have to come to me and say, like, I don't understand why my character's doing this. And theater actors are very good at kind of um doing the work themselves, because once you're on stage, once the show is running, the director's not going to pull the curtain just because you accidentally said, I love him, instead of I love him. Like, they're not going to stop the show. So you kind of have to know how to direct yourself a bit on stage, I think. And I think when I was starting out, especially, I was calling people that I'd worked with from, community theater shows in the past. Like, can you come for 2 hours on a Wednesday night and we'll shoot 2 scenes and that's it? Which is, when you think about it, it's less time consuming than rehearsing a play. Yeah, I'd like to work with a lot of the same people, just because I think we can develop a kind of a shorthand where, you're working with someone multiple times, and you start to notice certain things, certain quirks. When they're in a certain mood, they're going to do a certain kind of scene really well. When they're in another kind of mood, they're not going to do it well on the first take. So you have to know how to work with them and kind of think, okay, well, usually she's really good on the third take, but he's usually really good on the second take. So we have to find some way to get them on the same page. You kind of trust one another, and it's a more kind of cohesive and harmonious working relationship. I try to do that with every film. I try to bring in new people while still working with the ones I've worked with before. I think it's just about things that make you uncomfortable. Things like death and grief and trauma and things that we don't like to talk about. I think horror films are a great way to kind of almost prepare yourself for all that stuff. Like, when my dad died, it was so random and so unexpected, and it was just awful. And yet I do remember thinking, oh, thank God I watch horror films, because I feel like I've rehearsed this in some way, by watching other people die in horrible, unexpected ways. You do kind of, in some ways, confront that in a kind of a vicarious way that's maybe a little bit healthier than the real thing. I think that's what horror is. It's just sort of a genre that confronts the stuff we don't like to talk about. The truth of the matter for me is that when I was a kid, I was scared of everything, and I had the worst nightmares ever. I mean, there's terrifying stuff. Like, no horror film will ever compare to how scary those were. And I noticed that when I started seeing horror films, the nightmares just started going away. If you watch a film where, the lead character conquers the evil at the end, it's very cathartic. You go, oh, maybe if they can do it, if they can defeat, Freddy Krueger, I can sure take that test or ask that person out, or, whatever. Your fears look kind of measly compared to what they just had to deal with. And so that's nice too. And it just, I don't know, it just makes me grateful to be alive. I think sometimes you go, well, my week wasn't great, but at least I wasn't just sawed in half like that poor dude, It's, I don't know, just kind of puts things into perspective. There's the Giallo, which I've just done a second draft of. I finished that Friday. If it goes well, I'm going to probably start shooting that early next year. I've I've kind of got a whole lot of ideas that are kind of in outline stages. Just, there's a lot of stuff I would love to do at some point, so I'd like to keep doing this for as long as humanly possible. It would be nice. Don't think you can match like a big budget Hollywood film. You don't have the money, you don't have the resources. Start small. So get people together, get your friends, get your classmates if you're in school. Do it on the weekends or at night when you're not working. You know, you have to find those little hours. Use the time that you have, and it's going to be slow. And so if you're one of those people that likes the instant gratification, it's not the business for you. But ultimately, if you start small and you build, you will eventually create something. But find a way to have some fun, because this can be, at its best, the most fun you will ever have. If you are passionate about your story, you have a good group to work with, it's going to be great.